Good evening. I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, December 30th. And tonight, Canada's Governor General is reflecting on the past year in her New Year's remarks, remembering the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Mary Simon says 2022 was a, quote, difficult and monumental year for all Canadians. Ms. Simon says over the past year, Canadians witnessed devastating weather events caused by climate change and continued to experience the emotions sparked by the discovery of what are believed to be unmarked graves at former residential schools. Ms. Simon is the country's first Indigenous Governor General, and she encouraged Canadians to reach out to their friends and neighbors and work together in the new year. All right, turning to the funeral procession of a slain Ontario provincial police officer, in which dozens of officers and members of the public are paying tribute. A procession carrying 28-year-old Constable Greg Prashala's body started around 9 a.m. It transported him north from Toronto to his hometown of Barrie, Ontario. Members of the public watched from overpasses along Highway 400 as the hearse and police cars with flashing lights passed by. The OPP say his funeral will be held in Barrie on January 4th. Meanwhile, the Hamilton Fire Department has confirmed that 4 people, including 2 children, are dead after they were pulled from a house fire in the city's southeast end on Thursday night. The 2 adults and 2 children died in hospital after firefighters found them on the 2nd floor of the burning townhouse. Hamilton Fire Chief Dave Cunliffe says emergency crews did everything they could through very difficult conditions. 2 other people inside the home were taken to hospital where they were in stable condition. An RCMP officer who interviewed the survivors of a Christmas Eve bus crash near Merritt, BC, says it's time for bus passengers to buckle up. Constable James Ward says people have a false sense of security associated with buses, and he warned against holding on to the misconception that because buses are so large, passengers will be okay in a crash. Traveling west from Kelowna towards Merritt, a bus went off the road, crossed the median, and flipped onto its side. The crash killed 4 people and injured dozens of others. Provinces and territories have been able to sell edibles since 2020, but Quebec only started selling cannabis-infused food this year, and in a much different form. Quebec says edibles designed to look and taste like sweets are off limits. The aim is to not tempt young people. Now, despite those efforts, industry experts suggest the rules do little to stamp out illegal sales. Provincially owned cannabis stores can only sell edibles like blackcurrant bites, dehydrated beets, dried figs, and dried cauliflower. All right, well, a proponent for a bill to make First Nation policing an essential service is hoping it will be tabled in the House of Commons by the spring. Leonard Bush is a former police chief and the executive director of the First Nations Chiefs of Police Association. He says the bill will finally help Indigenous communities adequately fund their own police services. Mr. Bush's association and the Assembly of First Nations has been working with Public Safety Canada on drafting the legislation. He says it could also help with recruitment, keeping First Nations officers in the communities where they live. The Competition Tribunal has dismissed an application from Canada's competition watchdog, which is seeking to block the proposed $26 billion purchase of Shaw Communications by Rogers Communications. Now, although the move still requires approval from Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, it practically clears the way for the deal to go through. The deal includes the sale of Shaw-owned Freedom Mobile to Quebecor-owned Videotron. In a summary of its decision released on Thursday, the tribunal says the merger of the 2 telecommunications companies would not result in materially higher prices. The decision says the deal would not likely prevent or lessen competition substantially. It also says a more detailed decision will be released in the next 2 days. An Indigenous community still healing from recent mass stabbings has received a gift from Saskatchewan's RCMP. The Indigenous Policing Unit collected 45 hockey bags, which were filled with equipment for the youth of James Smith Cree Nation to hit the ice with. Staff Sergeant Brian Kelly says the most rewarding part was seeing their reaction. The Mounties say plans are being worked out for a pickup hockey game with the youth. All right, well, meanwhile, the Canadian men's soccer team has been voted the Canadian Press Team of the Year after competing at the World Cup for the first time in 36 years. The soccer squad received 23 votes in balloting by Canadian media. This while Canada's Davis Cup team, which won its first ever world tennis title in November, was runner-up with 19 votes. All right, stay with us. Forum Daily. We'll be right back after the break with a look at airline delays in Canada. Stay tuned. Canada's two major airlines are falling behind, at least when it comes to being on time. Aviation analytics company Cirium says Canada's two biggest airlines, Air Canada and WestJet, ranked low in terms of performance this year. The data firm says that among the 10 biggest airlines in Canada and the U.S., Air Canada and WestJet Airlines ranked the worst and second worst for their punctuality. Cirium says Air Canada had on-time arrivals for about 55.6% of its roughly 143,000 flights as of mid-December. Well, joining us now to give us more insight into this issue is Mr. John Gradek, aviation expert, faculty lecturer, and coordinator of the Aviation Management Program at McGill University. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So what were the major reasons behind these delays, and could these delays have been prevented?
Oh, delays such as these are probably unheard of. I think that, the only time I've seen situations worse is what probably has happened to Southwest over the last week or so in the US. But, 55% on-time arrival performance for an airline is not really acceptable. It's something that you would see probably in third world countries that have old airplanes that have, poor air traffic control or poor airport management practices. So it is not an acceptable level of performance.
Not acceptable indeed, sir. Now, on that note, Air Canada and WestJet topped the list of airlines in both Canada and the United States. So what does that say about the state of Canada's aviation industry right now, especially compared to our neighbors down south?
Well, it's broken. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I think that we need to be able to do a better job of really understanding the capability of our commercial aviation system to handle the volume of flights that are being planned both by Air Canada and WestJet, as well as some of the other carriers as well. There seems to be a disconnect between what the airlines want to fly and what they're proposing to fly, and what the system is able to handle in terms of volumes. And it's very apparent that there seems to be a problem in terms of making sure that we're only flying as much as the system can handle.
And we saw a lot of travel delays due to weather, so weather-related travel delays. Is there any way that airlines can maybe prepare for weather-related travel delays in the new year?
Winter happens. This is Canada. We have snowstorms. Not This is not a black swan event. It's never happened before. We have it, starting November, and we got hit this year. Unfortunately, we got hit in the middle of the peak Christmas season. Sorry, and so it really, it did compound the issue. But we've had this before. It's not something that's unusual. I think what makes this one unusual and the extent of which it caused grief was again a function of COVID, the long shadow of COVID following us up in terms of the loss of experienced personnel that know how to handle an airline, know how to handle an airport during a snowstorm. We've lost all of that talent as a result of all the layoffs that we had in the last couple of years. And while the numbers are back up, people pride themselves, the airlines pride themselves in saying they have more people now than they had before COVID. The people just aren't experienced enough to be able to handle this.
So how would you suggest aviation industry professionals to address these issues in the airline industry, especially coming into the new year and improving performance overall?
Well, I think we need to have a better process of making sure that everybody everybody in the system, whether it's airports, CATSA, CBSA, AirNav, whoever it is, has enough information from the airlines about the volume of traffic that they need. The airlines should start sharing that information fairly far in advance, so that when we come to staffing and manning and looking at gates and looking at baggage belts and stuff like that, that everybody understands the volume that's going to be coming at the airports and they're ready for it. Right now, it really is a very, very hit and miss type of process. And it was very apparent, particularly in Pearson and at Vancouver, that we really did not have an effective process in place to be able to handle the volume.
All right, Mr. Gradek, just about a minute left here, but what is your overall outlook for the air travel sector in 2023? Any positive outlook at all?
It's going to be a great year. It's going to be a great year. I think we've got a lot of new airlines, a lot of newer airlines showing up in the Canadian domestic market. You have Porter showing up as well in 2023 with some brand new airplanes. Lots of capacity in the marketplace. So from the Canadian consumer's perspective, domestic travel, maybe even some US travel, may be at a all-time low in terms of airfares. So because of all that competition. However, the downside of that is that you're going to have a lot of demand for international travel, and carriers are going to want to make as much money as they can internationally. So the international airfares will remain high, if not higher. But domestically, we should be in pretty good shape in terms of fares for Canadian travelers.
All right, Mr. Gradek, thank you again for your time today.
My pleasure.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for our weekly crypto and digital asset update with Bobby Del Rio, host of the Daily Drop. Take it away, Bobby.
So we got to start with Sam Bankman-Fried. Basically, any conversation about crypto in 2022, unfortunately, begins with Sam Bankman-Fried. So somehow he got himself extradited to the U.S. and then he got himself bail, and now he is apparently in a house in his parents' home. And also, there are allegations that he was just able to retrieve over $600,000 of crypto. This is quite disconcerting, right? Because you're talking about one of the most powerful figures in crypto who has access to the best developers, the best technology, the most wealth, the top politicians. There's a myth that all blockchains are public, which means that they can be tracked. Unfortunately, that's not true, right? So you can actually, through many, many different scenarios, make your money private, launder your money, hide your money, and Sam Bankman-Fried had access to the very best of everything in the space. So, I understand that he's in his parents' home, but there's billions of dollars missing from FTX, and I would put money that Sam Bankman-Fried has hidden, I don't know, at least a bill for himself somewhere. So pretty disconcerting, and the allegations keep coming. Speaking of allegations, there were allegations that Solana, which is one of the biggest cryptocurrencies in the world, was on a death spiral. And since the FTX collapse, Solana, one of the biggest layer one blockchains in the world, Ethereum's biggest competition, lost about 50% of its value. And that means it puts it to 97% off its all-time high. Now, I will say I was on a Twitter space yesterday just listening, and they had 1,200 people, very passionate people in the Solana community who are guaranteeing that it is not going to die. They are doubling down. And since they did that, the price of Solana has started to increase again. So it looks like in tragedy, the sort of inspiration and passion of the community comes, and that's what's going to save cryptocurrency is community. Speaking of community, the NFT community has experienced quite a few setbacks. And again, the numbers in crypto for 2022 are pretty astronomical, but trading volumes declined by 99% for NFTs, 99%. So even, famed NFT projects like the Bored Apes have lost 80, 90% of their value this year. Now, when you think about the NFT world, people tend to they lack the nuance of differentiating between the speculative NFT market and the technology, right? Because I believe in the technology long term. There's many use cases where NFTs are going to disrupt probably every industry in the world. But the speculative NFT market, which is essentially just collectibles, JPEGs, pictures of animals that were in some cases selling for millions of dollars, that entire market has collapsed. And there is no guarantee that that market is going to come back up. And, this is really what I think 2023 is going to be. And that'll segue nicely into my last point. But the macroeconomic situation is that We are waiting to see what is going to survive this extended crypto winter, and what is going to still be there when the economy finally corrects. And even though Bitcoin was created as a hedge to fiat, right? Bitcoin was essentially created as a reaction to the economic system. The reality is right now, crypto, Web3, blockchain, NFTs, all of these things are highly correlated to the broader macroeconomic environment, which means that in a risk-off environment, which with all of the forecasts of a 2023 recession looming, means that volatile, risky assets like crypto, even parcels of land in the metaverse, NFTs, all of these things. Right now, the projections are we're gonna experience more devastation. With that said, crypto does have a sort of mind of its own, and we're gonna find out how independent crypto is from the rest of the economy. So that's the update. Happy New Year. We're over to you, Nima.
Thanks for that, Bobby. Again, that was Bobby Del Rio, host of The Daily Drop, which airs on Fridays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, only on the News Forum Network. All right, stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after the break with a look at news from around the world, of course. Democrats in Congress have released 6 years of former President Donald Trump's tax returns. It's the culmination of a years-long effort to learn about the finances of a one-time business mogul who broke decades of political norms when he refused to voluntarily release the information as he sought the White House. The returns are from 2015 to 2020. Mr. Trump is criticizing the release, saying the returns show how proudly successful he has been. The tax information could take on added significance now that Mr. Trump has launched a campaign for the White House in 2024. 10 months into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and overwhelming evidence shows that the Kremlin's troops have waged total war with a complete disregard for international laws. Ukraine is investigating more than 58,000 potential Russian war crimes. They range from killings and kidnappings to indiscriminate bombings and sexual assaults. Reporting by the Associated Press and Frontline has verified more than 600 incidents that appear to violate the laws of war. All right, moving to tensions in Iran now, where state TV says the country's military has kicked off its annual drill in the coastal area of the Gulf of Oman and near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. The maneuvers come even as authorities continue their crackdown on anti-government protests, which have been underway for over 3 months. The passageway playing host is crucial to global energy supplies, with about a fifth of all oil traded at sea passing through it. Spain is following Italy and other countries in requiring air passengers coming from China to have negative COVID-19 tests or proof of vaccination. Spanish Health Minister Carolina Darias didn't specify when the new government will take effect, but she said there exists a shared concern internationally and nationally over the evolution of cases in China, as well as the difficulty to make a correct evaluation of the COVID-19 situation, given the scant information available. France, South Korea, and the UK are also moving to impose COVID-19 restrictions on air passengers from China. Almost 3 years after officials announced the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in Indonesia, the country's leader says they are lifting all coronavirus-related restrictions countrywide. Large-scale social restrictions had been imposed in the world's 4th most populous nation in April 2020. President Joko Widodo says Indonesia's COVID-19 situation is under control after observing improvements over the past 10 months. All right, turning now to a disturbing case involving Andrew Tate, a divisive social media personality and former professional kickboxer. Now, he has been detained in Romania on charges of human trafficking and rape. As a British U.S. citizen, Mr. Tate has previously been banned from various social media platforms for expressing misogynistic views and posting hate speech. Romanian media outlets appear to show Mr. Tate being led away in handcuffs by law enforcement officers. Meanwhile, a court in military-ruled Myanmar has convicted the country's ousted leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, of corruption. It is sentencing her to 7 years in prison in the last of a string of criminal cases against her. The court's action leaves her with a total of 33 years to serve in prison. Now, this follows a series of politically tinged prosecutions since the army toppled her elected government in February of 2021. Southwest Airlines has returned to a relatively normal flight schedule. This comes after crews were split up and stranded. Baggage was scattered across the country, and passengers were left out in the cold. The airline says it is working to make things right. This with what could be more than 1 million passengers who missed family connections or flights home during the holidays. The Dallas carrier had canceled thousands of flights every day this week after a winter storm last weekend. Brazilian soccer legend Pelé died yesterday. He was 82. He had been undergoing treatment for colon cancer since 2021. Mr. Pelé won a record 3 World Cups with Brazil, and he was the standard bearer of the game with the national team and his club Santos. His funeral will be held at Vila Belmiro Stadium on Monday and Tuesday. Santos said his coffin will be placed in the center circle of the field. Well, it looks like Canadians continue to make their mark on Jeopardy! The latest being Ray Lalonde, a Toronto-based scenic artist who's won 11 games and counting. He is just the latest in a new generation of trivia titans to take up residence on the Alex Trebek stage. After Thursday's game, Mr. Lalonde had amassed $311,500 US. Consider also Mateo Roach, the 24-year-old Canadian Jeopardy champ who won 23 straight games earlier this year. Now, this gives her the 5th longest streak in the show's history. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.